Hello and welcome everybody to The Week That Really Was with John McGurk and Sarah Ryan for this week ending the 9th of August 2024. As you can see behind me, I am stuck in wet and windy Tipperary, while Sarah is somewhere on her holidays in the eastern part of the Mediterranean, and we won't say exactly where, but Sarah, is it at least better there?
Yes, it is, and it's 36 degrees, and I know that's not really your cup of tea, but for me, it's perfect.
No, well, it's nice if you can get in the water, I suppose, if it's 36 degrees. If you can go swimming and what have you, but no, it's not nice. These people who sit out in the sun and bake, that's really not my thing. Anyway, much as we could talk about the weather all day, it's been a surprisingly busy week for the second week of August. A lot has happened. I mean, we had obviously Olympic success. We've had riots in Britain. I saw a very funny tweet saying that Britain in a neighbourly way had kind of adopted France's usual summer riots to make way for the Olympics. We had a new vice presidential nominee in the United States. We had Orangemen and Fenians uniting themselves in protest in the streets of Belfast, with all sorts of things happening. But I want to start with you. You were quite outraged the other day by a tweet sent by Off the Ball in the aftermath of Kellie Harrington's sporting victory. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose outraged. Yes, I just marvel at the hypocrisy of it. This is a group of people, and I'll get to some of our political heads as well, but who went out of their way to try and cancel Kellie Harrington a year ago. Would it be roughly a year ago? And now that she's winning gold medals, that's all forgotten and they're all celebrating and she's one of ours again. And it just shows that, you know, when she was not part of the clique, not part of the gang, she was worthy of contempt, and people in the political classes, including Timmy Dooley, our esteemed Clare senator, deliberately tweeting at Spar to try and get her to lose her promotions, which obviously I imagine, I don't know, but for a career in boxing is probably a large amount of her income, and really just going after her. And now that's all forgotten because she's a winner and she's one of us. And it's just like, it's the worst part of Irish society. It's my most hated part. She tweeted or retweeted a tweet about a 12-year-old girl who was murdered in France. And all of a sudden that was the crime of the century. And now, and it's just hypocrisy on another level. And I hope she doesn't give any interviews to those guys. I hope she has nothing to do with them.
Yeah, well, you're a hero so long as you toe the line. Isn't that the rule? And I think one of the things I think that sickens people about this is the kind of abuse of power that's involved. Like, where journalists who have never really achieved anything of note themselves kind of position themselves as the moral guardians of society and relish, in some cases, their ability to make and break people and tear people down for stepping a foot out of line. And I mean, I think what happened to Kellie Harrington 2 years ago was the epitome of cancel culture. It was, and what sickened me at the time was the journalist, who actually comes from the same part of the country that I do, and is by no means the sole offender here, so I'm not singling him out. What actually struck me was all the other journalists at the time piling on and saying, "Oh, well done, Shane, phenomenal piece of journalism, great questioning, well done, you, brilliant, you really put it up to her, showed the importance of journalism in society." No, you just launched a political attack on an athlete who you disagreed with over a tweet. That's not journalism. That is just an abuse of your power, in my view. I mean, I'm sure the journalist in question would ferociously disagree and defend himself, as he's entitled to do so. But that's how I saw it. And I think that's how a lot of other people saw it as well. So then to see all those same people who were congratulating him, jumping up and down, celebrating her historic achievement, it had a whiff. It reminded me a little bit of the Carlow schoolgirls incident, where it was just, we'll all forget that ever happened and move on, seemed to be the attitude. And yeah, it rubbed me the wrong way. And I think, judging by the reaction on social media, it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
But also, we all know that if she had tweeted or retweeted a political position that aligned with him, he wouldn't have brought it up at all. She's an athlete.
No.
It's nothing to do with... the interview has nothing to do with politics. Obviously she retweets something, but if she'd retweeted something about, something that he agreed with, he never would have brought it up. It comes from a position of that there's a kind of there's a number of athletes who are religious, who are, you know, conservative in their values, and they just hate it. The mainstream media just hate it. And, you know, it's that they're trying to kind of like, yeah, okay, she's amazing and everything, but like, let's do a bit of a gotcha on her to remind people that she's not really one of us. It's a sort of a weird snobbery, anti-religion, something going on in there I can't really put my finger on. But it's definitely not the space. And they all...
As I said, it reminds me of Katie Taylor. Like when Katie Taylor would win a fight and then the first thing she'd do would be to pray, or when she'd do an interview and the first thing she'd do would be to reference her faith. Like you could on the very rare occasions I've seen clips of it, but you could see, like, observe physically the embarrassment and the cringe in the RTÉ studio. The, oh my God, she's talking about God again, where do we look? Kind of attitude that permeates Irish journalism. It's not just on religious issues, but it's on all these kinds of issues. I think you hit the nail on the head. Like if Kellie Harrington had tweeted her support for, you know, gay pride or something, as she would as a proud lesbian, that would never have been asked. Or if it had been, repeal the eighth, no one had ever said, well, why are you getting involved in politics, Kellie? It would have been clap on the back, you know, fair play. It is the single approved view to be a leading person in Irish society, with the intent of creating a chilling effect so that no other athlete will dare step out of line. So we'll never find out what Charlene Maudsley's opinion on anything is, unless it's in line with the approved set of opinions. And like, that's what the journalism was acting to do there. It wasn't journalism to illuminate the public. It was journalism to keep the uppity people in line. And I think there's a lot of that about it.
Same old, John. Same old. But the problem here was that while you attempted to cancel her, it's desperately awkward and inconvenient that she's now come back with 2 gold medals, and you have to try and reframe her in your mind's eye into something that's now worthy of being proud of. But you were very proud of her when you were trying to get her deal with Spar cancelled. And Spar should really... I remember Timmy Dooley, I was so disappointed in him. You know, Spar should look at their promotion of this person. Piss off. Like,
if you were disappointed in Timmy Dooley, you obviously started with a higher opinion of him than I have, to be honest.
Very well.
Because
I wouldn't say that.
I was entirely unsurprised by his conduct.
Well, okay, fine. I wasn't like, let's not overreach. But I just think that, like, going after somebody's job like that is just pathetic. And a politician who's lost their seat in Clare and is now a senator should really know better.
Yeah. I mean, I think your tweet, what did you say in your tweet? That you wished you had that amount of balls or something like that? Wasn't that what you said? To be able to just, congratulate her.
Shamelessness. The level of shamelessness is awe-inspiring, I said.
Yeah, it is. That's what it is. It's utterly shameless. Anyway.
I just didn't want to use my dad's phrase on Twitter, which is, you have a neck like a jockey's bollocks.
Yeah, well, very true. Anyway, that wasn't the only interaction with journalists we had this week. I had a row with Peter Murtagh. Peter Murtagh, the former opinion editor of the Irish Times, very eminent, very established journalist, and he said that I was shameful, Sarah. That's what he said. It hurt my feelings. He said that I was shameful because I had sent a tweet. Simon Harris, during the week, put out a statement through the government press office, which was released to the world, in which he said, look, the level of anger and aggression towards politicians is off the charts. Threats to politicians are outrageous. Some of us don't feel safe, etc., etc. Perfectly legitimate statement. He's right, in my view, to put it out. But I did make the point on social media that, you know, it is a pity that some people in some communities where this anger is coming from don't have the ability to put out press releases and have their concerns taken as automatically seriously by the press as Simon Harris does. And Peter took this, I think, as me saying, oh, it's grand, so why is he worried about the threats? When that wasn't what I was saying at all in the first instance. What I was saying was, why do journalists empathise with politicians who have 24-hour guarded protection and not with people in communities like Dundrum in County Tipperary or or Roscrea or any of these other towns that have been impacted and where people really do feel angry? And yes, in many cases, whether it's correct or whether it's incorrect, they feel unsafe. And journalists don't take those concerns half as seriously. And I just thought it was kind of emblematic of a way in which journalists empathise with people based on social class and respectability more than whether their concerns are valid.
Well, first of all, I think I've said this to you before, but like sometimes you shouldn't bother with arguing with people who are absolutely committed to misunderstanding you, because it was obvious what you were saying. But that aside, I think that there's something happening in Irish society, which is that there's what's the quote? Like all revolutions start with the working classes. And there's a mood and something happening with the working classes in Ireland. They're very, very angry. And, there is a lot of commentary about how the local and European elections didn't really show that and people didn't get elected or whatever. But if you actually look at it, working classes traditionally have the lowest registered voters, the lowest turnout, and the highest amount of accidentally spoiled votes, usually by an extra percentage or so, judging from my analysis of the numbers recently. And I really noticed that during those local and European elections, particularly with Niall, that I'd occasionally, if I was talking about the campaign on the podcast, I'd occasionally get a message from somebody saying, look, I'm living in Blackrock and I'm just as furious about this as anybody else, and why are you acting as if this is just a working class thing? And that's fine. But I think that there's a disdain that's kind of shown for these groups of people. It leaks out in some of the commentary, it leaks out in the attitude. We'll get to it in a minute about the riots in the UK. But it's an other, they're the other, they're not us. They're just feral kind of people who are rioting, or the people in Coolock or whatever. And that's kind of what you're getting at there. It's that, certain types of people, they're concerned about their own personal, and obviously politicians should not be concerned for their personal safety ever. That's 100% a given. But there are other people who have concerns about their personal safety. And it's not that just that they can't release a press release, John. It's that their concerns are dismissed, that they're gaslit all the time, that they're called names for asking for help, saying that they're frightened, saying that they're concerned. And then somebody will come out from one of the political classes and say these people have been engaged with, when everybody knows they haven't. And it's a snobbery, and there's something happening there in Irish society. And I think, like, for example, and, this isn't a prediction that I want to happen, but if there's a recession and, we start to run into real difficulty in Ireland with our, large tech companies, and they start to leave, or maybe Twitter and Facebook start to leave Ireland because of regulation, whatever, like those people, the working class anger at the government spreads really fast. Because if you're walking down the road with your coffee in your hand to your job in Google and there's tents down the canal, maybe you don't care as much as if you're walking down the road with your CVs in your arm and you're feeling like the government is doing nothing to help you. And all of these things start to pulsate into other things. Like I said, all revolutions start with the working class. There's something happening in Ireland at the moment. And the constant dismissal of these people and their concerns, and the hierarchical value of one person's fear and anxiety over another's, is only going to make that worse. And I think that, it's nothing to do with Simon Harris's personal safety. The office of the Taoiseach and his family obviously should never, or any politician should ever, be concerned with their personal safety. But why is one person's personal safety or fear of just somehow more valuable than another's? That's what's wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I would suggest, I'd say, if you're watching this or listening to us, ask yourself a question, which is, all these people who are rioting in the UK, who are protesting in Coolock, who are protesting in Dundrum and County Tipperary, who you hear about and you see described as far right or thugs or the scum of the earth, or all the language that's used about them, when was the last time you saw a single one of them interviewed on Virgin Media or on RTE or on Pat Kenny on News Talk? When were they brought on and asked to explain their views and explain what it is that they're upset about? And the answer is that just doesn't happen. These people are kind of presented by the media as kind of a mass, separate, almost inhuman kind of event that happens to society, rather than something that's organic from within society. So they're, occasionally somebody like me will be brought on to be held to account for what they have done or what their views are. Yeah. But they themselves are never brought on and are never given a platform. They're the only group in society that's true of. The only group in society that's true of. There is absolutely, so the media treats them as this kind of separate other, kind of like a natural disaster, a phenomenon that is inhuman and has no voice and isn't to be spoken to or spoken of, and their views aren't to be heard. And then they wonder why these people are resorting in some instances to violence. I mean, and then the same media will turn around and tell you if there are riots happening in black communities in the US, that a riot is the language of the unheard. Oh, is it? I mean, so there's this massive media failure to interrogate these people. And, maybe you'll put on Fintan from Coolock on television and maybe he'll make an ass of himself. That's possible. But they won't even try that. There's no, well, what is it you're concerned about? And the reason for that is it's partly disdain, but it's also partly terror that platforming those views, in inverted commas, will cause them to spread. So the media think, a la Kitty Holland, that this is not helpful. I think that was her phrase, wasn't it? Describing that victim impact statement for which she's now being sued. Rightly, in my view. But we can't prejudge the outcome of court cases. Anyway,
but even when they have somebody like you on, John, it's just to ascertain whether or not you'll condemn all of the people who did everything.
Yeah.
And even when it is you, and because I'm your friend, I'll often watch you and watch Twitter at the same time. And there's always at least 20% more of people who are like, why is he being platformed? God forbid we, hear from him. So we're all there's a huge cohort of Irish society who are, it's what they're being told is these people are just scum. It's never going to affect you. These aren't worthy of your, and we're seeing it in the UK with riots, people being, 24-hour courts and 2-year sentences for people. Why did that not exist for other protests?
Yeah. So there's this two-tier Keir hashtag. Have you seen that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great.
And I mean, it's one of those things. And again, I saw the Irish Examiner publishing a piece during the week saying, "Oh, how did this two-tier Keir myth start?" It's that is just, you're literally just gaslighting us, because the reason why two-tier Keir is going viral is because it's something that is observably true to everybody. You don't have to be a genius to look at the UK or look at Ireland and observe that different crimes by different classes of people are treated differently. You go and you punch somebody in the face in a nightclub, for example, you will get a suspended sentence. You protest at the wrong protest and you will go to prison. So there is a two-tier justice system in both jurisdictions. That is observable reality. And then the media comes out and go, "Oh no, it's a far-right myth." You're making yourselves look like jackasses, lads. But they're intent on still doing it. So I mean, fair play.
But we'll just keep calling it out.
Yeah. Well, for as long as we're allowed, because the government is now talking in both jurisdictions, in both the UK and Ireland. You're seeing this massive focus now on regulating social media. I mean, I just think that's unworkable. What do you think there's anything they can do there?
Mm-hmm. No, but it might have a cooling effect on some people. But I think what I'm more surprised by is that I really thought that they were just going to go quiet on the hate speech bill, and it feels like they're kind of doubling down on this kind of 1984 style political policing, and I don't think that's a good idea, but obviously they do. And up until now, I've said a few times that I think Simon Harris is, the more of a politically shrewd person than I thought. But I mean, I'm just curious to know who they think is the audience for this. Who's the person, apart from an NGO that we all pay for? But where is the public desire for this? I've never met a person ever in my life who said, "Do you know, somebody said hurty words to me on the internet and I really want the government to make it a priority that that's illegal, or I really want them to arrest or hold personally liable executives in Twitter because somebody said something mean to me." I've never heard it. I don't know. Am I in a bubble?
No, but I don't think you're in a bubble. I think you're entirely correct, but I also think you might be misidentifying the impulse. So I think what the number one rule of the modern progressive liberal left is that if only they had their way, we would live in a world of milk and honey. That that the obstacle to just society is everybody else. So I think their view is that if only progressivism was dominant and these people were out of the way and social media wasn't inciting people, there'd be no riots in the UK, there'd be no immigration protests in Ireland. that the message would be getting through to people, and all this kind of far-right fear-mongering would go away if only they weren't reading it on Elon Musk's hate site. I think that's the impulse. And I think that is just laughably incorrect in the first instance. I think clearly, if you want to understand why there are riots, look at UK government policy over the last decade and look at Irish government policy over the last decade. There's your answer. It's not Elon Musk, but that's what they think. So it's kind of an impulse towards, if we just shut down the conversation, then all these problems will go away. Which is it's the equivalent of an ostrich hiding its head in the sand. I don't know if ostriches actually do that, but apparently they're accused of it. And hoping that the lion will go away. The lion is still going to eat you.
What a random analogy, John. Yeah,
well, the lion is maybe not going to eat you. The lion is going to hold up a tricolour and call you a traitor, but he's not going to eat you.
No. But I think that ultimately, regardless of what the motivation is, ultimately, I think that it's a political dead end. I don't think it gets you any votes. So I don't think it's going to be an election issue. I'm surprised he's bothering with it when he seemed to be quite shrewd about the immigration issue on the lead up to the local European elections. But we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I don't think they're going to do it, is the thing. I don't think we're going to see any legislation on this. I don't think there's going to be a law brought in. I think this is actually a bit of electioneering. So I think what the government is going to do is say, we need to tackle social media, and if we are elected, we will tackle social media, and then they're going to use social media as an excuse in the election for the disruption and disorder. So it won't be Fine Gael's policies cause this, which couldn't be admitted in an election campaign because that would be bad. It will be, if there is disorder and disruption during the election campaign or the lead into it, well, this is a factor of Elon Musk and social media and what he has wrought upon poor innocent Ireland. And this must be fixed and must be regulated. Whereas if they were to bring in the regulation before the election, then they would take that narrative away. So I think what we're seeing is the forming of a narrative that will be used in the election campaign. I mean, does that make sense? Am I on the right track, do you think there?
Yeah.
And of course, everyone will row in behind it because the media have an incentive to row in behind it because, they would love nothing better than to see the end of social media because, it's supplanted them and in some cases makes them look like Egypts. So there's that as well. That's the other factor. So it suits everybody to go with this narrative, I think. But do you not think Elon Musk doesn't help himself sometimes?
Why?
Well, this week he was like, I saw him tweeting this morning that the British government was going to send people to the Falkland Islands to a detention camp. He tweeted a fake headline from the Daily Telegraph that was shared by the leader of Britain First, which is a fringe party in the UK. And that is misinformation. It's fake news. It's bullshit that originated on his website that was then shared by the owner of the website. I mean, talk about making a rod for your own back. And I think I get criticised all the time, Sarah, for being anti-Trump because I think the guy does moronic things that weaken his own position and weaken the position of all the rest of us who are broadly share that worldview. I think Elon Musk is occasionally doing those things as well. I mean, if there's flack on you for being an agent of misinformation, don't maybe check whether the Telegraph headline you're tweeting is real. I mean, is that too much to ask? Is that? I mean, I'm sorry, am I a traitor to the cause for asking that people do that? Apparently, I am sometimes, but I just do think he makes a rod for his own back, and there's no need for it.
I don't know if Elon Musk is not doing that on purpose, though. I mean, does he just have a laugh with the whole thing? I wonder if the power of being so powerful that you're uncancelable gives you a kind of a giddy sense of just I'm going to do what I want to let them all go mad. Do you know what I mean? Surely it would have taken him 2 seconds to check that. So it makes me kind of suspicious that maybe he just does it on purpose because he doesn't give a shit. I don't know. Do you think that that's possible?
Yeah, but if so, I mean, I think that's a mistake because, I mean, ultimately, there's a lot of money riding on your brand, right? There's the reports this week, for example, that Tesla car sales in Europe are suffering reputedly because some high net worth Germans and Austrians don't approve of his political views, which is a story. I don't know whether that's true, but I'd well believe it. And I think ultimately, if you start making mistakes like that, they will eventually bite you on the backside. It might not be immediately apparent how that happens, I think ultimately it will happen. But I kind of find the most frustrating thing about the world we live in at the moment is everything is so tribal that you can't really. I mean, I get awful flack if I criticize Elon Musk from some readers. I get awful flack. It's like, how dare he save the internet? He did, yes. And I've written how grateful I am for that. I mean, he made a huge difference to us at Gript, for example. He get absolute credit for that. But at the same time, like, you that can be taken away and could be taken away. And he's got a duty to the rest of us to kind of, behave himself in so many words, I think. Boo away in the comments.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, you're right that it's so tribal that it's like, everybody assumes that you're 100%, you have to be 100% behind people who are considered to be on your side, whether it's Trump or Elon Musk, and any criticism is kind of, not being loyal to your side. And I can understand that that's kind of frustrating to people on our side, because the other side are also loyal to one another, that they can do, so there is an element of that. But at the same time, if you're doing things that's long-term damaging, you should be called out on it, and we should aspire to a kind of a higher standard, I suppose. But it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, would you and I not say that a lot of the problems on the other side, a lot of the problems we have in society at the moment are as a result of liberal groupthink? That very phenomenon, that kind of you look at Michael D. Higgins this week, writing a letter to the president of Iran saying how wonderful he was and how much we wished him good luck in his endeavours, and those endeavours appear to include killing loads of women and people for protesting, and yet hardly any criticism of him from the left because of that fear of groupthink. And I mean, I think that the way to fight groupthink on the other side is not to engage in it yourself.
Yeah.
That's
fair enough.
That's what I mean. Some people. Anyway, look, you had thoughts you wanted to raise
about. He'll be called next year.
Who?
Michael D.
Oh, Michael D. Yes, he will. That election is in November 2025. He'll be gone. Look forward to that. George Hook for president. That's what I say. Anyway, speaking of presidential elections, it was a big week for Kamala Harris. She picked a new running mate. You had thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a huge mistake. I think he's even more woke than her, which will long term not work. I think that she is overestimating her. I think she should have chosen somebody else for a variety of reasons that I'll get to, but not a good pick. And I think that, even though we have the laughs about my feelings about JD Vance, I'm not sure JD Vance was a good pick for Trump, but I think that this might have atoned that a little bit, or neutralised that, should I say, because I think that she's basically kind of done the same thing, appealed too much to the base, not enough to strategy. And I think if you look at, and we'll be peppered, and we are peppered in the Irish media with talk about polls that show her up this and up that, whatever. But if you actually look at the Electoral College and you look at the states she needs to win, I think this pick is a mistake.
I see a poll out just as we're recording this on yeah, I see we're recording this on Thursday. I see a poll just out from Scott Rasmussen, who's a Republican pollster and a good guy, a good pollster, very highly rated, where he has her up 3 points in Wisconsin, which is one of those states that she has to win. And obviously Pennsylvania is the other one, which is where I agree with you, because I think it struck me as insane that most people agree that the tipping point state, so that is the state that the winner of that state is 80% likely to win the election, whichever of them wins it, is Pennsylvania. And I mean, she's got the moderate, centrist, very popular Democratic governor of Pennsylvania right there, and she doesn't pick him. And she holds the rally to announce her vice president in Pennsylvania, in his hometown. So clearly she planned to pick him at some point and then changed her mind to go with this guy. And obviously some people say that's because Josh Shapiro, who's the governor of Pennsylvania, happens to be a Jewish guy who once volunteered to serve in the Israeli Defense Forces, and that wouldn't go down very well with parts of the Democratic base. But I think on paper, he was clearly the stronger pick, don't you think?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that she is overestimating her ability to carry that state without him. So we'll see. But I just think that I hear a lot of, not this poll, but I hear a lot of commentary in Ireland from people who simply don't understand the Electoral College. So, You know, it doesn't matter if she's 15 points or 100 points up in New York. You know, she was going to win New York. So it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? It matters. The swing states matter. The ones that are in contention matter. And I think that this would have solidified it for her. And I think that this will come back to haunt her. Another thing that I think is kind of interesting is that is she going to do any interviews? Are we going to hear from her, or are we just going to get loads of old videos over and over again of her saying that we need to all be more woke? Is that a strategy? Because it comes back to my point that I've made to you before, is that very soon after she was named vice president, she went dark. That you never heard from her. She did small things, media things. She's very, very quiet. And I don't think that I've seen somebody be in such a kind of a shocking, but like in such an unusual set of circumstances, suddenly become the Democratic nominee for president of the United States, but yet be so low key in terms of actually sitting down and doing a one-on-one, intense, hard interview with somebody. I think that that's really surprising. And you'll never hear that commented on because it doesn't fit the narrative. But I think it's strange. Do you not?
Well, I think if she was capable of doing those interviews, she'd be doing them, because you would, wouldn't you? You put your candidate out there because that's where they'd look the best. And if they were hitting it out of the park, I mean, you'd put them on Fox News if you thought they could handle Fox News and get that viral content of answers being aced. And so clearly that is not her strength. And clearly they're going to try and keep her away from that. And clearly that is something for the Trump campaign to attack her on. But like, I'm struck by how flat-footed the Trump campaign has been, Sarah. And I really am. I mean, and I know I get accused relentlessly. Oh, he hates Trump. He has Trump derangement syndrome. No, I don't hate Trump. I don't have Trump derangement syndrome. I just have questions. Like, why, if this is the most important election of our lifetimes, did Donald Trump spend the last week golfing with one campaign event in Montana, which according to your logic at the Electoral College of the state he's going to win anyway? Why did he spend it tweeting crazy stuff about Joe Biden getting back into the race? Why is he being outspent 2-1 in all the swing states in advertising when he's got just as much money as she does? Where is, you're the one saying, why isn't she doing interviews? Where is Donald Trump saying, why isn't she doing interviews? I mean, the whole Trump campaign just seems to have been caught really flat-footed. They're obsessed with this notion that you know, she called them weird. And now it kind of feels like they've taken that as a mortal psychological insult. And, oh, we're not weird. It just, look, I know it's heresy to speak against the king, but the king is asleep in this case. I mean, what's he actually doing? He hasn't done anything since his convention. Is that fair, or is that anti-Trump?
No, I think that they're missing low-hanging fruit and going into nonsense criticisms that we've discussed before about her personal life in the past, being called weird, stuff about what her actual ethnicity is. It's all very childish, and I think there's so much better to go on there. You know, like, where is she for interview? Let's push and push so that she's, you know, pressurized and create a kind of a squeeze on her to do a hard interview. Because if I was her and I'd been put onto the ticket by the Democrats to be the president, I'd want to go on to an interview and prove my ability as fast as possible. Let's pick an interviewer who is famous for mauling political candidates and let's put me in front of them. But like, there's so much low-hanging fruit to tackle there, and instead they're wandering around in the weeds of nonsense, childish shite that no one really cares about. The people who care about the stuff they're talking about already are voting for Trump, and the undecideds don't care about one thing that Trump has talked about for the last 2 weeks, and that's the main problem with his campaign at the moment. Like, stupid stuff. He got shot, you know, like, and that opportunity where, you know, people that won't like me saying this, but whether you like it or not, that's a political opportunity, and it seems to have been squandered a bit. And now it's just like Kamala, you know, different crap about Kamala, but nobody cares about that. Like, you've got stronger stuff to talk about there, and they don't seem to be taking it at all. And I don't know if that's a symptom that they've taken the election for granted, or that their strategy is not good. But I'd say another couple of weeks now, you might start to see them firing people at a high level and changing their strategy when they realise that it's not landing with the undecideds.
Yeah, but like, that's my criticism of Trump. Like, somebody else will get the blame. I mean, Chris LaCivita, who's run a perfect campaign for Trump up to this point, cruised through the primaries without having to debate, built a far more impressive machine than he had in 2016 or 2024. He will get the blame. He'll be fired, and some stooge will be brought in from the old days. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if Steve Bannon gets out of jail to see him back, because that's what happens. Somebody else always takes the blame. And I do want to come back on something you said about the popular vote in the Electoral College, because I mean that's a point I would make that I think is important. You're right. Trump could well win this election, losing the popular vote and sneaking through in the Electoral College. But I hate that kind of approach is being normalized, where it is, it's okay if this guy spends 8 years as president of the United States without ever winning a majority of the vote, without ever doing it. If you do that enough times,
that's the system,
you get into this lose. It is the system, but it will be the first time in history that happened. George W. Bush managed an electoral majority while barely losing the popular vote by less than a half a percentage point in 2000. He then won the popular vote by 3 points in 2004. Donald Trump lost it by a historic amount in 2016 to win the election. Almost won it by losing the popular vote by like 5 points in 2020. And we're talking about a similar kind of thing happening this time. And you say the system is good for Republicans. The system is good for conservatives. But when you keep bringing the system into these absurd situations don't tell me the founding fathers of the United States intended this to be the result. They didn't. Then eventually that system is going to break, and you're going to lose that advantage because enough people in the country will say, well, hang on a second, this fundamentally isn't fair. People should have more votes than land does. I think you should be aspiring to have a candidate who could win the majority of the popular vote as well as the Electoral College. But Trump seems to have lower expectations amongst people that, well, if we scrape in, it doesn't really matter if 52% of Americans vote against us, so long as the 47% are concentrated in the right states. That is the system. You're correct. But don't expect it to remain the system or for your agenda to have popular legitimacy if that's the case. I do have issues with that, I have to say. But then I just hate Trump. I'm just a Trump hater who has no valid points whatsoever.
You old romantic, you for the political. I don't know. I just didn't think you were such a.
I'm joking. I didn't mean to
idealist.
sound as bitter as I might have said there. I think you have to be an idealist to some extent. Speaking of idealism, were you not delighted to see the unity between orange and green on this island that took place in Belfast last weekend?
I mean, I don't know anymore. Were you?
I thought it was very funny. I sent a joke tweet. I sent a tweet that I intended to be entirely a joke. I said, isn't it amazing that the far right, in inverted commas, can accomplish what all the lads from the Good Friday Agreement with their memorial lectures and their Nobel Prizes couldn't do it, and bring working class orange men and nationalists together again? And I meant it as a joke. It was meant to be a joke. And people took it so seriously, it ended up with 150,000 views or something mad like that. And I was like, oh my God, people might have thought I was being serious. I thought it was funny. And I thought the reaction to it was a bit hysterical as well, to be honest. I think that there is a point that both communities have obviously shared problem at the moment. And I also think that there's kind of like a, you can't have anything in common with a unionist ever, seems to be the message from some people on the nationalist side, which seems to me to be a message that is entirely at odds with any concept of unity on the island. But I don't have strong feelings on it, to be honest. What do you think of it?
I don't have strong feelings of it, but I think it's another example of an emerging thing in our politics, which is strange bedfellows. I find myself, for example, often 100% in agreement and completely on side with women on the transgender stuff that I would have been completely at odds with on repeal. And you just have to kind of find a way to, issues evolve and things happen, and people eventually have to take sides with people they never would have imagined before. That's an element of culture wars. That's an element of what's happening with immigration and all these kind of things. So it's another symptom of something that's happening in Ireland, which is, it's not, and we've said this on the podcast before, it's not just about left and right. There's a class thing happening. There's a political underclass, or an underclass of people who feel completely disenfranchised on certain issues. And they have to, like, you know, dance with the one what brung them, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I think the instincts of people who want to form alliances are good. I think that's a fundamental thing. I think that the optics were not great. I also think that kind of like, as Matt Tracy wrote for Gript this week, I mean, this is not just sort of regular mainstream unionism. Some of the people at that protest on the loyalist side were kind of like, had links, shall we say, to people who, you know, wouldn't ordinarily wave a tricolour. They might burn it or do more. So I think it's kind of one of those things where, on balance, it was a mistake for those people to go up north. And I mean, the funny thing is, if you're one of the people who are defending it and saying, "Oh, it was perfectly legitimate," I'd ask, is the reverse legitimate? Like, so are you going to bring down our loyalist brethren to the streets of Coolock and have them fly the Union flag and maybe the Royal Standard as well? If the answer to that question is no, we wouldn't do that because that would alienate loads and loads of people, then it probably was a bad idea to go to Belfast. Because, you know, you may alienate loads and loads of people either from your own community or people who share your views in the other community in Northern Ireland. I think there's a difference between cooperation and co-option. I think you can cooperate with somebody without being co-opted. But I mean, look, I've worked closely with Leisha de Bruin from the Countess on many issues. I think she's a wonderful person. You know, I think she's a very brave person. But we disagree fundamentally on a whole range of issues. Like, a whole range of issues we disagree fundamentally on. And we cooperate, I think, on areas where we agree. But I don't co-opt her and she doesn't co-opt me. And I think there's a difference between cooperation and co-option, is what I would say there.
Well, let's see. Let's see what happens.
Anyway, was there anything else this week that caught your attention?
Not really. I'm obviously away, so you're kind of a little bit like out of the kind of political scene. But and I won't tell you because I know you get very distressed about how many octopuses I've eaten since I got here.
I
know you don't like that.
No. That's terrible. That's terrible. I haven't been killing them with your bare hands this time, have you?
No, I didn't kill it with my bare hands. I shot it.
Like a real right-winger.
Oh, dear.
But no, I've been kind of trying to have a break from the noise. But as Keith and I were talking about it this morning, like, normally this time of year, there's nothing doing. But there's actually quite a lot going on between one thing and the next. Yeah. So, yeah, like, I'm kind of keeping an eye. But I'm interested now to see how the next few months evolve in terms of our own political situation, because I notice a lot of announcements on Twitter. I don't know if you've noticed of candidate selection, not just Fine Gael, Labour, Social Democrats, Fianna Fáil. So they're all obviously gearing up in a major way for a general election, probably in the next, 2 or 3 months. So I think that if you pay attention,
politicians are all telling us there isn't going to be an election.
Do you believe them?
I was saying the politicians are all telling us there ain't going to be an election in the next 2 or 3 months, but they sure are acting like it.
Yeah, I don't believe them.
I don't believe them either. I think we'll leave it there, though, because it is you're on holidays. We don't want to keep you any longer for this week, so we'll make this a shorter episode than usual. But thank you, as ever, to the listeners for listening and the viewers for watching. And we'll be back next week with another edition of The Week That Really Was. I've been John. She's been Sarah. And we bid you all a good weekend. Take care.